Letter 230 by Charles Lamb. Charles Lamb to William Wordsworth, April 26, 1816. Pleased to state the weights and amounts of the following lots of sold sale. 181 for your obedient servant. Charles Lamb, Accountant's Office, 26 Apra, 1816. Dear W., I have just finished the pleasing task of correcting the revise of the poems in letter. I hope they will come out faultless. One blunder I saw and shuddered at. The hallucinating rascal had printed battered for battened, this last not conveying any distinct sense to his gaping soul. The reader, as they call him, had discovered it and given it the marginal brand, but the substitutory N had not yet appeared. I accompanied his notice with a most pathetic address to the printer not to neglect the correction. I know how such a blunder would batter at your peace. Batter is written batten and corrected to batter in the margin. With regard to the works, the letter I read with unabated satisfaction. Such a thing was wanted, called for. The parallel of Cotton with Burns I heartily approve. Walton hallows any page in which his reverend name appears. Duty archly bending to purposes of general benevolence is exquisite. The poems I endeavored not to understand, but to read them with my eye alone, and I think I succeeded. Some people will do that when they come out, you'll say. As if I were to luxuriate tomorrow at some picture gallery I was never at before, and going by today by chance, found the door open, had but 5 minutes to look about me, peeped in. Just such a chastised peep I took with my mind at the lines my luxuriating eye was coursing over unrestrained. Not to anticipate another day's fuller satisfaction. Coleridge is printing X-Stable, by Eld Byron's recommendation to Murray, with what he calls a vision, Kubla Khan, which said vision he repeats so enchantingly that it irradiates and brings heaven and Elysian bowers into my parlor while he sings or says it. But there is an observation, never tell thy dreams, and I am almost afraid that Kubla Khan is an owl that won't bear daylight. I fear lest it should be discovered by the lantern of typography and clear redacting to letters, no better than nonsense or no sense. When I was young, I used to chant with ecstasy mild Arcadians ever blooming, till somebody told me it was meant to be nonsense. Even yet I have a lingering attachment to it, and think it better than Windsor Forest, dying Extian's address and C. has sent his tragedy to DLT. It cannot be acted this season, and by their manner of receiving it, I hope he will be able to alter it to make them accept it for next. He is at present under the medical care of a Mr. Gilman Kilman, a Highgate apothecary, where he plays at leaving off Laud M. I think his essentials not touched. He is very bad, but then he wonderfully picks up another day, and his face when he repeats his verses hath its ancient glory, an archangel a little damaged. Will Miss H. pardon our not replying at length to her kind letter? We are not quiet enough. Morgan is with us every day, going betwixt Highgate and the Temple. Coleridge is absent but 4 miles, and the neighborhood of such a man is as exciting as the presence of 50 ordinary persons. 'Tis enough to be within the whiff and wind of his genius, for us not to possess our souls in quiet. If I lived with him or the author of the excursion, I should in a very little time lose my own identity, and be dragged along in the current of other people's thoughts, hampered in a net. How cool I sit in this office, with no possible interruption further than what I may term material. There is not as much metaphysics in 36 of the people here as there is in the first page of Locke's treatise on the human understanding, or as much poetry as in any 10 lines of the Pleasures of Hope, or more natural beggar's petition. I never entangle myself in any of their speculations. Interruptions, if I try to write a letter even, I have dreadful. Just now within 4 lines, I was called off for 10 minutes to consult dusty old books for the settlement of obsolete errors. I hold you a guinea you don't find the chasm where I left off. So excellently the wounded sense closed again and was healed. N.B. Nothing said above to the contrary, but that I hold the personal presence of the 2 mentioned potent spirits at a rate as high as any. But I pay dearer. What amuses others robs me of myself. My mind is positively discharged into their greater currents, but flows with a willing violence. As to your question about work, it is far less oppressive to me than it was from circumstances. It takes all the golden part of the day away, a solid lump from 10 to 4, but it does not kill my peace as before. Some day or other I shall be in a taking again. My head aches and you have had enough. God bless you. Lamb had been correcting the proofs of Wordsworth's letter to a friend of Burns and his Thanksgiving Ode, with other short pieces, both published in 1816. In the letter to a friend of Robert Burns, which was called forth by the intended republication of Burns' life by Dr. Curry. Wordsworth incidentally compares Burns and Cott. The phrase which Lamb commends is in the description of Tam O'Shanter, page 22. This reprobate sits down to his cups, while the storm is roaring, and heaven and earth are in confusion. The night is driven on by song and tumultuous noise. Laughter and jest thicken as the beverage improves upon the palate. Conjugal fidelity archly bends to the service of general benevolence. Selfishness is not absent, but wearing the mask of social cordiality. Coleridge's Christabel, with Kubla Khan and the Pains of Sleep, was published by Murray in 1816. It ran into a second edition quickly, but was not too well received. The Edinburgh indeed described it as destitute of one ray of genius. In a letter from Fanny Godwin to Mary Shelley, July 20, 1816, in Dowden's Life of Shelley, we read that Lamb says Christabel ought never to have been published, and that no one understood it, and Kubla Khan is nonsense. But this was probably idle gossip. Lamb had admired Christabel to the full, but he may have thought its publication in an incomplete state an error. Coleridge was introduced to Mr. James Gilman of the Grove, Highgate, by Dr. Adams of Hatton Garden, to whom he had applied for medical aid. Adams suggested that Gilman should take Coleridge into his house. Gilman arranged on April 11 that Adams should bring Coleridge on the following day. Coleridge went alone and conquered. He promised to begin domestication on the next day, and I looked with impatience, wrote Gilman in his Life of Coleridge, for the morrow. I felt indeed almost spellbound without the desire of release. Coleridge did not come on the morrow, but 2 days later. He remained with the Gilmans for the rest of his life. The Pleasures of Hope, by Thomas Campbell. The Beggar's Petition, Pity the Sorrows of a Poor Old Man, by Thomas Moss, 1740–1808, a ditty in all the recitation books. Lamb alluded to it in the London Magazine version of his Elia essay, A Complaint of the Decay of Beggars. Here should come a brief note from Lamb to Leigh Hunt, dated May 13, 1816, accompanying Falstaff's letters, etc., and a gift of John Woodville. This is Lamb's first letter to James Henry Leigh Hunt, 1784–1859, that has been preserved. He had known Hunt, an old Christ's Hospitaller, but later than Lamb's day for some years. To his Reflector he contributed a number of essays and humorous letters in 1810–1811, and he had written also for the Examiner in 1812 and during Hunt's imprisonment in 1813–1815. The Lambs visited him regularly at the Surrey jail. One of Lamb's most charming poems is inscribed to T.L. H. Thornton Leigh Hunt, whom he called his favorite child.